My name is Emeko Kereke, and I am the Artistic Director of Invisible Borders Trans-African Project. Invisible Borders Trans-African Project was founded in 2009, and the premise of the project is basically to bring African artists together to begin reflections and conversations around the question of borders as it relates to the 54 countries of the continent, but also the diaspora. The most prominent form of the project has been the Invisible Borders Trans-African road trips. Every year since 2009, African artists have come together to travel from one African country across several others, and in the process, making useful encounters, conversing and living with each other, and creating works that are precipitates of the experience of being on the road and crossing borders. Now, as image makers who understand the potency of imagery, we thought the best we could do is to take on this question. But of course, we cannot talk about Africa without getting to know it ourselves. So we thought, well, the first thing we have to do is to begin by traveling across the continent, making all these encounters, mile after mile, as opposed to flying over. This whole notion of flying over sometimes feels like, teleportation. But for us, we thought, what happens in the in-between space? Those borders, there are lives there, from point A to point B. That stretch of road from one, demarcation of a country to another. What happens in between there? Most of the time that we talk about the relationship between Africa and Europe, it is in this really vertical way that places Europe on top and Africa underneath. And we thought, to do something proactive, to really look at a relationship that places Africa and Europe side by side, a much more horizontal way of looking at that relationship. So it was time for us to look at, what is happening within that colonial demarcation. And so we traveled within Nigeria. And it's not just because Nigeria was where the project was founded. It goes beyond that. Nigeria is actually a microcosm of the African challenge or the African problem of complexity, of diversity. First off, Nigeria is 1/5 of the population of Africa. In the country, there are about 250 different ethnic groups and over 500 languages spoken. So the seriousness of diversity in Nigeria is great. But also, when you look at how the country was put together, and of course, what is happening now as repercussions of all of that, that it was important for us to really travel within the country to look at the effect of that, what I would like to call a colonial contraption. And the chapbooks from the writers really focuses on this, their own experiences of passing through these borders within. So yeah, that's basically it for Cosmopolis. Talking about future projects, well, the Invisible Borders project has already gone beyond the road trip. We already have a very strong literary perspective of the project. We have our journal now called The Trans-African. It's a journal of African art and visual culture. We've had it for about a year now, developing it, where 3 writers come together every year to write one essay per month. So that's 3 essays, and they continue all the way to the end of the year. So, and that is sort of an edition, one edition of the project. Then the next year, 3 or more writers will take on this, and they are basically writers who come together to reflect on African art and visual culture. So images, imagery, but it doesn't stop at photographs, but everything, visual culture. That's one. There's also, we are right now making our first ever Invisible Borders book, the definitive book that articulates all the impulses, all the ideas, all the various layers of the project so far. This book is very important because it is for us like a milestone, like a chapter 1. It's like closing. 2009 until now, there's been all this development of concepts and ideas, and we want this book to articulate all of that, so that we can now close this chapter and then move on to how we are thinking of the project now, which is to expand it beyond its operative context of, talking about physical borders.
Hi, I'm Innocent Sekijuba. I'm the project manager in Invisible Borders Trans-African Organization. As a project manager, basically, as the designation goes, I work on the projects, which quite interesting, to be honest. It's probably one of the most interesting and exhilarating things I've done in a while. We normally go to the process of selecting participants for every project, which is a bit different from the norm. I mean, when you speak about collectives, you normally have closed group collectives where a number of people are inside a collective. When they want to accept more people, they accept into the collective. But Invisible Borders operates a little bit different from that. It's, if I may call it a collective extraordinaire, as we don't play by the normal rules of collective. It's more of an organization that operates in a collective manner. So what we do is, for every project we have, for every road trip, for every project, we bring together participants, we bring together artists, filmmakers, writers, and photographers. And these people are going to take part in that project, and then for the next project, we do the same thing again. We bring a new set. Some of these participants go on to become administrative members of the organization, but a whole lot of them actually go on to other things. It's important we keep the membership of the organization this fluid, so as to give opportunity to rising artists, to give opportunity to new people, and also to keep the organization on its toes. By leaving it that open, there is this flow of ideas, there is this flow of people, there is this flow from place to place. It's essentially, as our mission goes in the whole Invisible Borders idea, it also creates an invisible, it takes down any invisible border that may exist between different generations of artists. We've had, from 2009, we've had 6 road trips, and we're currently working on the 7th road trip. We've had 1 transcontinental road trip, we've had 4 trans-African road trips, and we had a trans-Nigerian road trip, which was the Borders Within 2016 road trip. This year, we'll be having a 2nd trans-Nigerian road trip with the Borders Within 2. And next year, we'll have another trans-African road trip, and hopefully the year after that, we'll have our 6th trans-African road trip, which would be our 10th road trip.
My name is Yinka Joba, and I'm Director of Publications for Invisible Borders. I joined Invisible Borders at first as a participant in 2016 Borders Within Road Trip project. Project saw artists, photographers and writers travel across Nigeria, writing and photographing about ethnic formations in post-colonial Nigeria. For Invisible Borders, writing has always existed with a sense of urgency, meaning that on the go, there has to be a real-time documentation and writing of the experiences as the artists move across different borders. So this is how it has been, real-time writing of fragments, thoughts, experiences, ideas, and etc. on the go. But for the last road trip, there was a little bit of, that's the Borders Within road trip, there was a little bit of space for reflection for the writers after the road trip to be able to come, and that was how we arrived at the chapbook. The writers came up with the chapbook after the road trip, and there was a bit of more solidified thinking as against the quick fragments that you produce on the road. And also, this is how we as a body are evolving into becoming, a publishing entity. This is our baby steps into publication. For our exhibition, we're having a collage, and for the first time inside that collage, there's going to be images alongside with text. We are doing this because originally this is how words and images have existed in Invisible Borders. On the road trip, there has been collaborations between writers and photographers, in producing work. And so we feel like it's important for this to also, happen inside the exhibition. The writing is going to contain anecdotes, and words basically that guide the audience into understanding, backdrops of things that happened during the road trip. Just because, there are stories they don't know because they were not on the road trip, and there are stories that cannot be captured in the chapbook because of the kind of sentiments they contain. So for the writers, it's going to be an exercise in remembrance. They are going to reflect on the road trip and then, write again thoughts that might have solidified over time from the road trip.